The next person I'm going to bring up on stage is someone who pushed us a few years ago to become more inclusive. And actually, if anyone is looking to understand what inclusion really means, they should definitely talk to this woman. But she has pushed us, and as an event, she's responsible, similarly like Gemma with her Brave Agenda, but similarly to push us to become a more inclusive event, from the people we have on stage to the way we have the experience to the whole kind of experience of the event. And last year, we utilized her contacts and skills to bring on stage disability. And I don't think any other media event in particular had kind of focused on the issue of disability. And the speaker that came with Sam last year has since gone on to speak at Davos and go to the Palace in recent weeks. So what we wanted to do was take that conversation a stage further. And I'm pleased to bring to the stage Sam Phillips, who is one of our everyday heroes at the festival and is also CMO for OMG Group. Yes, Sam.
Hello, everyone. I'm walking I'm trying to find the clicker, which has disappeared, so I can get off to a good start. Thank you, Jeremy. Bit tricky to do slides with no clicker. So hello, everyone. I am Sam Phillips, and I have several roles. I guess key to this conversation today is that I am chair of Open UK, which effectively represents all areas of diversity and inclusion right across all of Omnicom's agencies in the UK. So that amounts to about 9,000 people. And clearly disability sits within that. I'm also, and have been for 14 years in various guises, the CMO of Omnicom Media Group in the UK, and I'm Assistant Dean of our Global Exec Education Programme, Omnicom University. But I'm going to focus in, as Jeremy suggested today, on disability, which I believe is a truly important subject, and every single one of you, and thank you for coming to talk about disability, because it's often one of those things that people go, oh God, awkward, don't know what to do, fear, not going to talk to people. So we are talking about it this morning to break that down. I believe it is hugely important, and I thought I might give you a little bit of an insight into why I believe it is so important. So I'm going to start with the personal. This is my family. On the right-hand side there, in the Crystal Palace kit, is my eldest son, Max. Max is now 16. When Max was born, he was born stillborn. Every single vital organ had failed. He had the highest blood acidity of any baby who'd actually ever survived at St Thomas's Hospital in London. He wasn't expected to live for his first few days, and look at him now. He is an extraordinary child. He reads, he writes, he's the funniest person in my family. And after he was about 1 year old, when we knew he was definitely going to survive, I started looking at things like employment statistics and where he could possibly ever go and work, because this is a real human being. And I was genuinely shocked to find that 86% of adults with Down syndrome who are capable of finding employment cannot find employment because people like us will not think about employing them. In the front there, you have Tallulah, my little girl. She wasn't always called Tallulah. She used to be called Svetlana. We adopted her from a Russian orphanage a few years ago, and we're always on the lookout for signs of institutionalization. I think we're doing quite well in terms of getting away with that. And I used to make this really hilarious joke about all my children having a cross to bear, because top right there is Ted, and I used to say, and he's got ginger hair. And that was really funny. And actually, a few months ago now, he was diagnosed with ADHD. Full set. And I'm like, I don't see this as an issue, though, okay? I genuinely don't, because one of the things that I know from all the work that I do is that if you've got ADHD, you are more creative. And I just think we've got to start looking through the other end of the telescope at some of these things and thinking less about the dis and more about the abilities, because lots of people with disabilities are actually more capable in some areas than people who are neurotypical. The astute amongst you might have seen the Royal Marsden balloons there. That was my husband. He died 2 years ago. He died of non-smoking lung cancer, having been in the army and a teacher and never having had a cigarette in his life. So for a while, I had 2 blue badges in my family. There aren't many people that can say that. And if anything is going to put the guts into you to go for it and to try and change the world and change our industry a bit, because every single one of you sitting here today has the capability, you have the power to do something, to really move this conversation on, it's something like this. Professionally, I have really lent in now for a number of years, and that led to me getting spotted by the British government, and I was asked to become the UK advertising sector champion for disability, which I guess gets me stages like this. And effectively, when I'm asked to go and speak at something, I always do. Kudos to this organisation, because they've really kept it on the agenda. But this is me interviewing the Minister for Disability at a very large media conference in London, for example. And whenever I'm asked to write about disability, I do, because I genuinely think it's important that we make this a conversation that is had. And sometimes you have to say things time and time and time again. This was for the global edition of Campaign that went out around Cannes. I'm going to give you 3 areas to think about in terms of why disability, visibility, and inclusion is important. First of all, let's look at workforces, okay? We all work in big, well, not necessarily big, we all work in companies that have a lot of impact and power. And for me, the workforce thing is really important. So I'm going to give you some numbers. 20% of people in Great Britain, for example, of the world, have some sort of disability, okay? That is a big number. In urban conurbations, for example, London, that rises to 27%. This is not a little thing that we're talking about. We've actually just done a piece of research in the UK across our Omnicom in the UK workforce, and already at this stage, we know that 11% of our people in our businesses have actually got some sort of disability. 79% of those are invisible disabilities, 14% of them are visible and invisible. So don't think this is something that's out there. It's happening right here on our doorstep before we've actually proactively really got into it and started actually interviewing and taking people into our businesses who are different. And I firmly believe that different is not worse. In terms of our outputs, there are not that many organizations and clients who have yet gone sort of over the hill and started actually putting people with visible disabilities, for example, in their work. And please do, it's a genuine market opportunity. Lloyds Banking Group did a great piece of research a couple of years ago that showed that only 0.06% of all outputs featured anyone with any sort of a disability. And that was, in great part, at that time, Mars with their Maltesers campaign. Their uplifts were 8%. It was the best piece of work they'd ever done in terms of effectiveness. And when other clients do venture into this, for example, Lloyds Banking Group, River Island, McCain's, they are finding exactly the same effect. So if you're not going to do it for the humans, do it for the commercials, because it genuinely makes sense. And in terms of the audience, the countries, the world does not see themselves, if you've got one of these disabilities, reflected in our outputs. And that's crazy, because what we know is that when people see themselves reflected, they are much more likely to go and buy your brand, product, or service. 3/4 of people who have got a disability or their close families have walked out of shops because they have not felt included by the sales force, for example. What are we doing, guys? Clients, I've got pages and pages on this, are really starting to lean into this conversation. Some of the really big ones that lead conversations. This is Mars, for example, and they talk about our industry in the UK, for example, spending £20 billion a year creating content that goes on people's screens at home and impacts their lives, and about the responsibility to be inclusive and to represent society that spend actually gives us all. And then you've got companies like Unilever who are going out there and making fantastic, ambitious statements saying that they are going to be the biggest employer of people with disabilities by 2025. Last year, Jeremy alluded to this, I bought this lady, this is me, sitting on a stage very like this, Dr. Caroline Casey. Caroline is an extraordinary woman who's founded something called Valuable. Valuable is about changing the business world, our world's perception of the world's 1.3 billion people with disabilities. And what she did, was actually try and get a call to action going, or this is active at the moment, by launching something called the Valuable 500, which we launched at Davos this year. And what this is about getting 500 companies, big companies, you have to have over 1,000 people to really drive into this, to sign this, not to stop anyone with a smaller workforce doing this. But this is about them actually putting disability on their board agendas in 2019 and then doing something about it. And I would really encourage anyone that wants to get involved in this to do so. Omnicom, the company that I work with, has really lent into this. We're a strategic partner, and also our biggest boss, John Wren, has put his signature on this, on the Valuable 500, to sign us up. And lots of our agencies have got involved in making change. And this, for example, is Valuable and Caroline at the Palace. Very recently at St James's Palace. And this is the Countess of Wessex talking about people with disabilities are actually now being brought out of the shadows, but many are still in the shade and society is at a disadvantage. I'm going to play to you now a film that is created by one of our agencies, A&V BBDO, but lots of our agencies have actually really got behind this, creating websites and that sort of thing. It's quite a powerful piece. This is only a 30-second film. But have a look in it, maybe shift in your seats a bit. And for any of you that are sitting there going, oh, this is all very interesting, talking about disability, but it's a bit too complicated, we don't have to go there. Watch this, and I hope you think again.
Are there people with disabilities working in senior management?
We have women, lots of women in the company. They're like everywhere. Tim's Asian, and gay too, which is great, 2 for 1 right there. So I think we're good. So.
It's time we start talking about this. There are a lot of companies out there who are now doing this and really leaning in. 70% of companies who start actively employing people with disabilities and putting them in their outputs actually say it was easy. Not moderately difficult, but easy. The average cost of adaptations is £80. And by the way, adaptations usually work better for every single person, whether they have some sort of a disability or not. This is an example I'm very proud of Omnicom doing something about disability. So last week, we launched in the UK our first business resource group around disability. It was an extraordinary launch. Please follow it. Absolutely fantastic. And many of the speakers that you'll see me pairing up with on stage came to speak at this as well. And it really is changing the story within our business and then within our client base as well as we move forwards. This year, I haven't got Dr. Caroline Casey with me again. I'm introducing you to someone else, and another extraordinary woman. And I met this lady, Stacey Stockwell, when I was asked to go and to present to the Council of Europe about the role of the media in driving disability visibility. And this is her, Stacey Stockwell. She will join us in a moment. Some of you met her last night because she was signing at the awards. She runs a disability awareness company. And many of you may be thinking, well, what is that? So I'm going to get her up to the stage now so that we can ask those questions. And then Stacey is going to do a 20-minute set with you all, actually actively showing you a little about disability awareness, and then we'll take some questions. So please can we welcome Stacey to the stage. So, Stacey, where I would like to start is how on earth did you ever get involved in disability awareness to start off with?
Well, it was a bit of a fluke because I was in sales and our company said, we're going to give you a grant to learn something new and you have to go to college. We couldn't just run away with the money. And I was flicking through the brochure in the sales office, actually, going, flower arranging anyone? Spanish, plumbing. And I flicked over and there was sign language. And I thought, well, I'll have a go at sign language. So I went to my first lesson, was hooked from my first lesson. And so the big thing there for me is that I wanted to be an interpreter. That was my dream. Mm-hmm. I was 23 at the time. And within a couple of years, I was quite good at sign language, it seemed. And a couple of years later, I was given the opportunity to go and work with pupils in college to support them in their lectures. And what struck me more than anything, because when you sign, you just sit in a room full of people, you know, all hearing people together, and you sign, and it's great. But then you get out to the real world, and I was just absolutely astonished at how hearing people treated deaf people. And I didn't know the first thing really about deaf people either. But what occurred to me very, very quickly is that they were just scared. They were just, this person is quite different from me, and I don't really know anything about them or their way of life, and so I'm either going to avoid the situation or say something bizarre. And so I wanted to do something about that. I asked a friend of mine if she fancied setting up a deaf awareness training company. Well, putting the money in for the deaf awareness training company, and I would do the work. And I made 1 million calls from my bedroom and eventually got hold of a director from Marriott Hotels who said, well, yeah. I said, let me come in and I'll just do a 3-hour presentation for nothing and see what you think. And I went in and he was like, oh, that was marvelous, but we can't just focus in on deaf awareness. If we're going to spend this sort of money, we need to look across the board. And I said, I know nothing about disability, but if you let me go and learn, then I will come back to you with another 3-hour presentation. And that's exactly what I did 6 months later, and I got my first UK rollout I trained in every single Marriott hotel back then, and I've never looked back.
So which other companies do you work with? Because that might help inspire people in the room to think that maybe they should do some as well.
So I train for a very broad range. I do a lot of work with ambulance services now, which kind of naturally evolved because, of course, they're rocking up to situations every day where half an hour ago that person wasn't disabled, and now, of course, they are. But I train for hotels. I train for Premier League football clubs. I train for, can I say company names? Am I allowed to say company?
Company names, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Virgin Media and Tesco and lots of universities and councils and really anybody that wants disability awareness training.
Can we focus in for a moment on this fear that we touched on? I think I touched on it and you touched on it as well. A lot of people feel very uncomfortable around disability, often if it's not touched them in any way, or even within that, if one particular sort of disability has touched them but not others. What do we have to do to actually break that down, that fear, so that we can actually start doing more?
Well, basically, so the fear comes from, I think the fear comes from the fact that we go to school and we spend thousands of hours learning English and maths and history and geography, but we never actually spend any time learning about one another. And then typically what happens in later life is that you meet somebody who looks, acts, or sounds differently from yourself, and that's where the fear comes from. If a person can't avoid that situation, then next common sense will take over. And common sense will tell people that person is deaf, let's write it down. They're blind, we'll back them into this chair, or they're a wheelchair user, so I'll bend over. Hello, how can... and these aren't necessarily the right things to do, but they happen obviously every day, hundreds and thousands of times a day. The way to get people more comfortable around disability is, first of all, to break down the many, many, many misconceptions that people have surrounding it. So the number one is that it's us and them. And as you well know, 83% of disabled people have become disabled during their lifetime. And in fact, the chance of disability affecting you in your lifetime, or the person you love most in the world, if it hasn't already, is actually higher than almost any other thing that can happen to you throughout your life. And there are a million misconceptions. You know, strokes and heart attacks happen to old people, or MS gets diagnosed in your 40s, or deaf people read lips, or blind people read Braille, and there are millions and millions of them. So you get people sort of comfy and break those down, and then you give people some amazing tools to actually, how do we communicate with people who don't communicate in a conventional way? How do we lead a blind person? How do we remove the fear of, you mean I have to touch them? Well, yeah, we do have to touch. And people will say, for blind people, they'll say, you know, if I say to them, for example, if you're going to talk to a blind person, then you need to start talking, touch them gently on the forearm, just to let them know that it's them that you're talking to, because you've all been there where you've stood on a train platform when you're checking your phone and somebody says, all right, and you go, yeah, oh, shit. Because it's not you they're talking to, it's the person behind. Everybody feels that sort of uncomfortableness. And if you're going to give a blind person a cup, then you would take the back of their hand. And people will say to me, you know, it's quite intimate, isn't it? We don't generally touch strangers that we don't know, but actually, hi, nice to meet you. We do it every single day. So start adding these things in, and people go, oh yeah, I see what you mean. And what was the question? I've gone completely off.
I don't know, but I'm going with you. I'm fascinated by it. So for companies that actually do think about now, hopefully, getting some disability awareness training amongst their staff, and this is not a sort of a one-off thing, we need to keep going with it, what would you hope that the audiences, the people who actually see you or see other disability awareness in place, what would you hope that they feel and think by the time you've left the room?
After I've trained,
Yeah.
you mean? Well, a couple of things. Firstly, more confident, way more confident. I want people to not only feel confident in their jobs, but really in their lives as well. So I have a 3-hour dementia course. I put in 10 minutes on every single course that I train. It's the biggest killer now in the UK, and very few of us are going to make it through our lives without knowing somebody we love who has dementia. Yeah. And you give somebody that, you give somebody some amazing practical tips that they think to themselves, I can go home and actually do this. So a lot of my feedback is that delegates will say, you've given me something for life, not just for my work, but for life. And it's win-win. You know, disability awareness, not only are you conforming, but just say, for example, something went awry, a disabled person decides that, you know, they want to take issue with that. If that case got to court and the judge goes, what did you do? You put in some ramps. What did you do? You put in some ramps, you did this, you had some awareness training, you were really absolutely committed to trying to make sure that disabled people had the, you know, good access, equal access to your goods and services. What's going to happen? Your staff feel more comfortable, and not only feel more comfortable, but obviously there's all the invisible disabilities, so you've got staff sitting there thinking, well, I can't really say anything because nothing's being done about disability. So I'm not going to tell this person I've got Crohn's, for example, because it might affect my job. Yeah, people just feel more confident. And then, of course, you're attracting disabled people, just like you said earlier. You know, you see something within an organisation and think, actually, I'm going to go there. £249 billion spend in the UK alone for disabled people each year, and I would want some of that as a company. I would want to say, we know how to communicate with you or treat you, and people feel far more interested in how they are treated than physical adaptations. And we all know that. If we go to a restaurant and we have a pretty shoddy meal, but the waiter is lovely, or the waitress is lovely, we're far less likely to complain, so that's the way that works.
£8 trillion is the total global available money from people with disabilities and their very close family. That is the spend that advertisers are missing out on at the moment. And with that bombshell, I've got so many more questions I could ask Stacey, but I want to give her space and time, and then space and time for you guys at the end. So I'm going to leave the stage now and leave you in Stacey's very capable hands. Thank you.
Okay, lovely. I'm not chasing. I'm just going to give you a 20-minute section of something that I would do. As I said, my passion is to remove some misconceptions surrounding disability, give people the tools to be able to communicate with, lead, interact with disabled people in the right way. And one of the things that I do is effective communication, with quite a heavy lean on deafness, but this would apply to people who are hard of hearing, people who don't communicate in a conventional way, people who have just been deafened, for example. And this is the section that I would like to do with you now. So, how do we communicate with people who don't communicate in a conventional way? Well, there are certain rules that we need to follow. Some are easy and some are more difficult. The first and most important rule that we're all told when we're communicating with somebody who doesn't communicate in a conventional way is the rule about eye contact. Now, this is tricky because if you stare into a stranger's eyes for any length of time, you're likely to be arrested. It's very strange just to stare at somebody. We don't do this as human beings. What we tend to do if we're talking to a group of people like I'm doing now is you'd look around the room. If you're talking one-to-one with someone in a bar, for example, then we tend to do this sort of thing and see what's going on over there and see what's happening over there. So we don't keep eye contact with anyone for any length of time. We're going to do something to make that feel a lot more comfortable, you'll be pleased to know. And the other rules are easier. Distance apart between 3 and 6 feet is the perfect communication distance. And the other one is you need to be aware of where the light is. So if you're standing in front of a window or you've got any kind of spotlight behind you, it casts you straight down into silhouette and makes you very, very difficult to see. So if you're communicating with somebody in front of you here, just step round to the side so that you're both being side-lit and not backlit. Those are the rules. Now, once we've got the rules, then what do we do? Well, who in this room can lip read? Can deaf people lip read? Here's a very interesting thing, as I said earlier. It's a huge misconception that people think that deaf people can. Well, actually, lip reading is the #1 thing that we're all going to do with each other, as we will see. But lip reading depends on a lot of things. It depends on the shape of your lips, on the shape of your face. It depends on whether you've got a very strong accent or a beard or facial piercings. Crucially, if you're wearing sunglasses, it depends on a lot of things. But when a deaf person meets you for the first time or they're meeting you on rare occasion, that deaf person, when reading your lips, on average will pick up between 20 to 50% of what you say, and that's all. When a hearing person meets you for the first time, depending on all the things that I've just said, for example, if they were relying on lip reading you because the music was too loud, for example, they would pick up between 20 to 50% of what you say, like this. Okay. So we actually all lip read each other all of the time at about the same level, and it is the #1 thing that we are going to do when communicating with somebody else. But access to information, and equal access to information indeed, is one of the most important things in our lives. And when we don't get that, our lives can be extremely difficult. So 20 to 50% of the important information that you want to pick up is obviously way too low. The reason that it's so low is because when you're reading somebody's lips, actually you're doing just that. You're looking at the pattern that's happening on the outside of somebody's mouth. Everything going on inside the mouth is being missed. So in other words, the noises that my tongue is forming, S, C, G, J, S, H, C, H. What I'm going to do is give you some words. I just want you to mouth them to yourself, and I want you to see if you can feel any difference on the outside of your mouth between mystery and misery. Tree and drink. tumble and double, grumpy and rugby, you, shoe and juice. They look exactly the same on the outside of the mouth, and I've got hundreds of these phrases working the same way. I don't know if you were ever very bored at school and you turned to a classmate and then said colourful, or elephant juice was the other one. For those who can see me, what am I saying now? Did that start badly? For coughs and colds, you want to try that new Beecham's powder. So on the front of your mouth, things can look exactly the same as other things. And when there's a big communication breakdown between two people, what's generally happened is that you've missed the first letter of the word. It is the most important letter. So what if there was a way that we could put this letter in? What if I told you that this was a D and this was a T? Now, tumble and double look exactly the same on my mouth. Which word am I saying this time? Are you awake? Okay, and you know that because I put in that first letter. So there is a way of putting in the first letter. What we're actually going to do is learn the fingerspelling alphabet of sign language. There are 3 types of sign language in the UK alone. One is called British Sign Language, and you might have seen those if you ever can't sleep and you flick on the telly at 2 o'clock in the morning, and just on the corner there, between 12 midnight and 4 a.m., when all the deaf people are awake, that's when you see the interpreter in the corner. And British Sign Language is a funny old thing to watch. People will watch it and think, what are you doing? It can look weird. If you're up close to somebody signing, it can even sound different. So if I carry on using BSL to you now, it looks and sounds like this. People will go, what are you doing? What are you doing with your face? Well, I'll tell you what's happening with my face. British Sign Language is not mime, it's not Pidgin English, it's actually a completely different language to the English language in every way it can be. So syntax, structure, linguistics. With a spoken language, for example, English, we add in emotion, expression, and detail and exaggeration with the way that we say something. So if I said to you, for example, it was so far away, you know it was a long way away because of the way that I've said it. If you didn't do that, by the way, you would speak in a monotone and have no friends. So we have to do that with a spoken language. In sign language, you still add in all of these nuances, but because you're not using your vocal cords, you do it with certain facial expressions and also the way you use your body. So sign language is literally from here to here. There are lots of face shapes in BSL, and when you get up to a certain level, you have to start learning them. And here's one of them. It looks just like this. Now, it has to be just one cheek puffed out for this example, not 2, or that means something different. Your eyebrows have to go down. And what that does is it exaggerates the sign that you're using. So here's the sign for down there or over there. If somebody asks me where I lived and I reply, that's not far away. But if I reply, that would be a long way away, and they'd know that because of the way that I've used my face. So that's British Sign Language. There's another type of sign language in the UK called Makaton. Has anyone heard of Makaton before? If you've ever seen Mr. Tumble on CBBS, he uses that. It's basically based on British Sign Language, but it's designed for people with learning disabilities, and so it's more simplified. A couple of differences then. This is toilet in British Sign Language. In Makaton, it happens on this side of the body, because this is a much easier position to get your body into. This is BSL for milk. In Makaton, you just milk a cow. So it's kind of more simplified. And the last type of language, if I carry on using this to you now, it means if I had a deaf person there watching me, they'd be able to follow what I'm saying reasonably easily, because I'm using signs from British Sign Language, but following the structure of the English language. And that's called sign-supported English. The good news is that for all 3, the fingerspelling alphabet is exactly the same, which means that if we know it and the person we're communicating with knows it, it can take our communication, when used in the right way, from 20 to 50%, right up to 95. It is an amazing, amazing tool to have. So without further ado then, this is my one and only slide. Here it is. Now, this good old touch typing sentence uses every letter in the English language. When we learn new information, we prefer that information to be jumbled up first and then put back into order. So we'll learn it going through this sentence, and then we'll put it from A to Z. Is there anyone in this room left-handed? Okay, so when you sign, you have a dominant and submissive hand. Left-handed people do exactly the same as right-handed people, only the other way round. So instead of saying right and left, I'm actually going to say pen. and paper. Now, the pen is the hand that you write with. So if you all get your pens out like this, your dominant hand, okay, and then put your paper here, nice strongly in front of you just here. Now, you can see the fingers on your paper hand are your vowels, so if you point to your thumb, it's an A. Your first finger is E, your middle finger is I, your ring finger is O, and your little finger is U. So where is E? O, A, U, and I. Perfect. Now we've got our vowels, we're just going to add in the rest, and we're going to work through this sentence. So pens and papers out. A T looks like a T. For an H, brush across the top of your paper like this, and an E, as we know, is a vowel here on our first finger. The once more. A T looks like a T. For an H, brush across the top of your paper, and an E is a vowel here on your first finger. Excellent, good. All right, so a Q then looks like a Q. It's your pen that makes that stalky down bit there. A U is a vowel on your little finger. I is a vowel on your middle finger. A C is the only letter that happens on its own with your dominant hand. So whichever hand you write with makes the C. Okay, and now for K, bear with me on K. Nobody likes K. You just flip it over to make a hook like that, and then stick it onto that finger. And if you look at it, it looks like a K. Quick once more. So Q looks like a Q. The pen makes the stalky down bit. U is a vowel on your little finger. I is a vowel on your middle finger. A C happens on its own with your dominant hand. And then flip that over to make a hook and stick it onto that finger, and you have a K. Excellent, good. All right, B then. B for binoculars. B. You don't have to do it up here. Just do it here in front of you. I like that you do, though. This is a W. No, it's not. B for binoculars right in front of your chest. An R is a curly pen like this, comfortably in the palm of your hand. If you're right-handed, it's kind of like the backwards R of Toys R Us. If you're left-handed, you're spelling an R. O is a vowel on your ring finger, easiest vowel to remember, wedding ring shaped like an O. W for wigwam. And N is two flat fingers like this in the palm of your hand. Good. Brown once more. B for binoculars. R is a curly pen in the palm of your hand. O is a vowel on your ring finger. W for wigwam. And N is two flat fingers like this in the palm of your hand. Good. Fox for an F, you take two fingers and just put one over the other. F. O is a vowel on your ring finger. X looks like an X. What was B? What was F? Two fingers over two fingers. C happened on its own with your dominant hand. An X looks like an X. J is my favorite letter. For a J, you go from the tip of your middle finger to the tip of your thumb. You are spelling out a J on your paper. U is a vowel on your little finger. M is now three fingers in the palm of your hand. A P looks like a P. And because S is a curly letter, we take our little fingers and curl them around one another for S. M was three flat fingers in the palm of your hand. For a J, we just spell out a J on our paper. A Q looked like a Q. The pen made the stalky down bit. A P looks like a P. And S was a curly letter, so we curled our little fingers around one another. The next word is over, so we know where an O is. It's a vowel on our ring finger. And here is our new letter. It's a V in the palm of our hand. E is a vowel on your first finger, as you know. And R was that curly pen comfortably in the palm of your hand like this. Good. The T looks like a T. H, brush across the top of your paper. E is a vowel on your first finger. For an L, we just need one finger now. And again, it's in the palm of our hand. A is a vowel on your thumb. A Z looks like this. And then for a Y, bring forward the thumb and make the shape of a Y behind it. Excellent, good. Okay, lazy once more. L is one finger in the palm of your hand. A is a vowel on your thumb. A Z looks like this. And then for a Y, bring forward the thumb and make the shape of a Y behind it. Good. And then the last letter, dog. Capital D is just a D. You're just spelling out a D with your fingers. O is a vowel on your ring finger. A G is one potato, two potato. Dog once more, capital D. O is a vowel. G, okay. Generally, I would be a bit closer to my audience and you would actually be able to see what it is that I'm doing. I would also have more time with you to just go through it. But already, what do we know? Where was L? Can you remember where L was? Yes, it was. S was a curly one. H, you brushed across the top of your paper. T, okay, just try to say what you see then. What is this? Okay, so you can see already after about 6 minutes, I guess, that we did that, it's extremely, extremely easy to learn. We talked about, well, what we don't want to do is spell every word. If you did, your sentence would be very long, obviously, and your deaf person would be fast asleep. We talked about if somebody missed the first letter of the word, you said we could add it in. Well, we definitely wouldn't want to add in every first letter of word that we said, because that would be quite patronizing, wouldn't it? It would look like this. Do, look here, you, we don't want to do that. It's just if they miss a word or we miss a word, you can add in that letter and it makes it perfectly obvious. So you, shoe, and juice look exactly the same on the front of my mouth. Which word am I saying now? Am I saying grumpy or rugby? Am I saying pencil or metal? You guys closer to me here, read my lips. No clues? I'm going to do it exactly the same, no faster or slower, but this time I'm going to give you the first letter of that word, okay? This is the first letter of that word. Read my lips again. Colour. Which is impossible to lip read because the C happens inside the mouth. So the shape that you get on the outside of the mouth is la. As soon as you put in that C, it makes the word perfectly, perfectly obvious. It's a beautiful tool to have. And of course, it shows that you learned something about somebody else's language. So far, we've looked at being 3 to 6 feet apart, not having a light behind us. Reading one another's lips is the most important thing. So there's only one more thing that we need to add in now to make our communication complete. So who in this room knows sign language? Right, who's played charades before? Who has played that game, charades? In that case, I want you to play with me. Show me the sign for cold. It's not difficult in this room. Show me. Show me that you're cold. Yes. Show me the sign for hot. Come on, yes. Show me the sign for telephone. Show me the sign for food. Show me the sign for drink. Show me the sign for football. Show me the sign for tennis. Show me the sign for good. Yes. Show me the sign for bad. Yes. Show me the sign for maybe. I thought you didn't know sign language. It's perfect. It's called natural body language, and we use it every single day. If we were in a place now and the music was too loud and we couldn't hear one another, and I went, yeah, so we know exactly who it is I'm talking to and exactly what it is that I'm saying. We use it all of the time. And actually, there are very few things in this world that you can't show if you had to. The next time you're stood in the bathroom, have a look around and think, is there anything in here I couldn't show? Show me the sign for taps. What would you do? Yeah. Shampoo? Toothbrush? Towel? Everybody has to think about their towel a little bit. Okay, and then people will say to me, well, that only works with things, doesn't it? Objects, like toothbrush. It doesn't work with real words, like opinion. Or does it? If somebody's saying, in my opinion, what are they saying? They're saying, I think. Show me the sign for think. Yes. So, basically, all you have to do in order to communicate brilliantly with somebody that can't hear you is put these things together. We have to read one another's lips. We can add in the first letter of a word if they miss what that word was. And basically what you're going to do is go, what is the most obvious thing I can do with my body to show you what it is that I'm saying? And if you put all of this together, you get communication that looks like this. Don't make me come and hurt you. What do you think I've said? Just tell me what you think I've said. Yes? Yeah, well, that will do. Okay, let me try once more then. Yes. Show me. Show me what time you woke up. Perfect. Well done, well done. Thank you. Okay, so in a very, very short amount of time, obviously, would you agree that we're communicating with one another? We're actually, deafness is one of the top 5 causes of suicide worldwide. Just a couple of weeks ago, another deaf guy in Bristol in the UK hung himself from his banisters. The reason for this is because deaf people and people with disabilities in general are treated appallingly, not because people who don't have disabilities are horrible, awful people that want to hurt them, but because of this fear that we have, the vulnerability that says, I'm not quite sure what to do with you. Handing a pen and paper to a deaf person is absolutely the wrong thing to do for 2 reasons. One, a deaf person says something to me now and I respond like this. On the most basic level in the world, I'm not even trying to communicate with them. I've put up this big barrier between them and I, and I've said, write it down on a piece of paper, but much more than that. When a deaf person leaves school in the UK at the age of 16, unless they've had very specialist education, they have the average reading and writing ability of a 7-year-old, which doesn't tend to improve throughout their lives. Now, I'm not saying that deaf people are daft, far from that. My deaf friends, colleagues, are more intelligent than I'm ever going to be, but their grasp of the English language is nothing like mine, because they've never heard it. Imagine learning a language that you'd never heard. If I came in here today and said, we're all going to learn Aborigine today, but you've never heard it before, I'm never going to speak it to you, I'm never going to play it to you, I'm just going to write shapes down on this piece of paper, and you're going to have a bash. Look at the English language. Look at the beauty of the way that we change words depending on when they happened. Swimming, swam, swum, swim. In sign language, you show when something happens. Swim, past, swim, present, swim, future. But the word you keep hearing is swim. There are no INGs or EDs or plurals. They don't exist in sign language. So if you've never heard it and you can't see it, people will say, oh, they lip read. You see, that's how they know. So the difference on my mouth pattern between excited, exciting, and excite is nothing. So you can't hear it, you can't see it. When would you ever know when to use it? So a deaf person, when they're writing, is making these tenses up as they go along. My best friend texts me Christmas Eve, profoundly deaf. The kids are exciting about tomorrow. And I thought when she was at school, she would have learnt the girl is drinking. So why wouldn't the kids now be exciting? But we know that it's wrong, don't we? The structure is totally different. We would say, I want a drink. In sign language, you would sign drink, want me. So just take Joe Bloggs. He's working behind a bar. It's midnight. He's hot and sweaty. Everybody wants a drink. Somebody hands him a scrap of paper that says drink, want me. And his natural reaction is to go, are you Yoda? Because it doesn't make sense. And then you have the judgments that people generally have when people don't use their first language in the way that they do, and it goes on and on and on. So my big, and obviously that was a tiny, tiny, weeny bit of what it is that I do, but if you remove some misconceptions and you give people the tools to be able to feel more comfortable around disabled people and communicate with disabled people, lead disabled people, then, and I'm looking at Sam now, said, save me, I have no end to this sentence. I will still be here tomorrow morning finishing this sentence if you don't stop me.
you can see why when I met Stacey, I was like, I am grabbing onto you, lady, because you can help change the world a bit. We've got time for just a couple of questions. Has anyone got one? Yes, front row.
Okay, so the question was, what's the best way of learning sign language? And I'm going to try and make this answer as short as I possibly can. British Sign Language is totally different from the English language in every way it can be. I consider myself reasonably intelligent, and it took me 9 years to become fluent. It's a big, heavy thing. However, in the UK, things are changing. Education is improving all of the time. Cochlear implants, we're doing bilateral cochlear implants now, and things are changing more into sign-supported English. So if you can have a conversation and sign at the same time, and obviously the signs that you're using are from British Sign Language, then if a deaf person was here in this room, they would absolutely be included in this conversation while we can hear one another. I happen to have an online sign language course, which is quite a big thing. It's 83 modules long, designed to be taken over about 6 or 9 months. It really focuses on sign-supported English. It takes you through the principles of British Sign Language. It does some deaf awareness. It does sign song, this type of thing. It's supposed to be £199. I like to give it away. My accountant won't let me give it away, so I've taken the 9 off the end. It's £19 if you would like to do that course. All you have to do is drop me an email, and I'm going to put some cards at the bottom of here, fingerspelling cards, actually, so that you can brush up your fingerspelling when you go away. But yes, my personal opinion is learning British Sign Language, people go to college and they go, yay, and then think, oh, this is really hard and it makes no sense, and that would not be my recommendation. It's...
Just out of interest, how do you translate to, so you learn English, how does that translate in French?
Okay, so every sign language is different throughout the world, vastly different, in fact. But natural body language is basically universal sign language. So throughout the world, this is the sign for drink, and this is the sign for pain. One of the reasons that I'm so passionate about the paramedics, for example, is because obviously they're going to places all the time where suddenly people have become disabled. And if you remember the London bombings and the Ariana Grande concert last year, everybody was deafened. Everybody deafened in the blast, in the foyer, under the thing. So you can imagine, and I will give this as an example because it is so important, given the percentage of people who become disabled. Just say, for example, I attend a scene, there'd been some sort of blast or bomb, and somebody had lost their foot. Toby, you'd lost a foot. You're losing loads and loads of blood. You're going into shock. There are loads of people around you. It's mayhem. You can't hear me. Now, if you start losing consciousness, what do you think is happening to you? You're watching yourself bleed profusely. You lose consciousness. What do you think? And this is the same worldwide. You think you're dying, basically. I'm trying to get a line in your arm because I need, and you're fighting for your life against me. So if I do this, it's taken me 3 seconds, and it doesn't matter which language you speak. If I'm good enough at communicating that really important information over to that person, now they want me to put the line in. Now they're working with me. Communication worldwide is the most important thing for all of us, access to that really important information.
Brilliant. One more? No more. Okay, we're going to leave the stage, but thank you for listening, and please go back and start talking about disability, employing more people with disabilities. It is possible, and putting people with disabilities into your outputs, because that is what is going to really make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was fantastic. Brilliant stuff, guys. Thank you.